Chapter 61 Psychic Contract. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Secret Medicine. Xia Li fell into thinking, and then replied, "Teacher, do you mean a secret medicine like Junliang pills?" "Well, more or less, Xia Li knows a lot." Jiraiya also sighed at this time. "Well, I saw it in a book in the library. There are also secret medicines like blood-increasing pills." Jiraiya just looked at Xia Li when he heard this. In fact, he couldn't figure out why Xia Li was working so hard. It was obviously a time of peace and no one was forcing Xia Li. How on earth did he keep persisting like this? But hard work is definitely a good thing. Jiraiya didn't have to ask anything. He nodded and said, "But the secret medicine I'm talking about is not such a common secret medicine, but a secret medicine that can increase the foundation of a person's body. It's just right. Used by your age group." After hearing this, Xia Li stared at Jiraiya, hoping that Jiraiya would take it out immediately. However, he saw Jiraiya scratching his head, looking a little embarrassed when he looked at him, and said, "But, I don't have these secret medicines here." Suddenly, Xia Li felt as if a basin of cold water had been poured on her. Her rising enthusiasm was instantly extinguished, and then she stared at Jiraiya with a questioning look. Although Xia Li didn't speak, Jiraiya still read something from his eyes. "That is, you didn't say anything. My expectations were wasted." "Humph, Xia Li, although I don't have it here, you will get what you want later, you just need to practice the next ninjutsu well," Jiraiya said without any embarrassment, and took out a scroll, from which a huge scroll was channeled. Suddenly, Xia Li was shocked. If this scroll was not as expected, it should be a psychic scroll belonging to Myoboku Mountain. And if he wrote his name at the end, it would represent him in Myoboku Mountain, one of the 3 holy places. Signed a psychic contract. At this time, Xia Li also understood that the secret medicine Jiraiya mentioned was probably the secret medicine from Myoboku Mountain. At this moment, Xia Li was also recalling the original story of Hokage that he had almost forgotten, and then recalled what happened with Jiraiya, and found that although he could not remember clearly, it should indeed be the time when Jiraiya's chakra was not enough. Moreover, being able to use Sage Mode, even if it is not as perfect as Naruto's, can prove that Jiraiya's chakra amount is very high. So, has Jiraiya's chakra been trained like this since childhood? While Xia Li was thinking, Jiraiya had already opened the scroll. On the front of the scroll, Xia Li saw many names starting with Toad. It turned out to be the psychic scroll of Myoboku Mountain. Then, when the scroll was completely opened, Xia Li also saw 2 names written in the last blank space, Jiraiya and Minato. "Xia Li, write your name on this." Jiraiya called over Xia Li and said, "Okay." Xia Li also wrote her name at Jiraiya's prompting. Then, Jiraiya put away the scroll and asked, "Xia Li, you should be able to guess what the scroll just now is for, right?" "The Toad Clan Psychic Contract." Xia Li replied. "Well, yes, the secret medicine I mentioned is in their place. You should learn psychic skills from your teacher these days," Jiraiya said. "Okay." Although Xia Li felt that it would take him less than a few days to learn psychic skills, since Jiraiya said so, he couldn't deny it immediately. But, that's it for today. Jiraiya looked at the sky and realized that a long time had passed before he knew it. "Okay, teacher." Xia Li also agreed. Although he felt that it was still early, he was not in a hurry. Today's harvest was already big enough, including the Flying Thunder God, the secret medicine, and the psychic contracts of the 3 holy places. Even he would have to digest it for a long time. In the village of Konoha, Xia Li was looking at half a popsicle in his hand with a complicated mood. There seemed to be such a scene in his memory, but he didn't expect that this time the protagonist would become himself. "Why don't you eat it? Is it not to your liking?" Jiraiya looked at Xia Li with some confusion. No, I just don't eat these very often," Xia Li said and finally started eating. It tasted sweet and felt pretty good. "Don't you eat it often? You kids should like to eat these." Jiraiya was a little confused. "Well, it's not bad. It's just that I spent most of my family's money on nutritional supplements, so I can save on some unnecessary expenses. Xia Li replied. Oh, that's it. Xia Li is really sensible. Jiraiya sighed, and at the same time, he was also thinking about telling the third generation later, at least he can't make Xia Li unable to even afford to eat, but what Jiraiya didn't know was that Sinai's salary was actually enough for a normal family, at least if it wasn't extravagant and wasteful, it was enough. But there was no way. Xia Li had a big appetite, and it had been like this since the beginning of training. After learning lay dun massage, his appetite increased to another level, which caused Sinai's salary to become a little tight. Xia Li didn't answer. He was a little embarrassed by praising him for being sensible, but he did it on purpose. He hoped that Sinai's salary would increase in the future. As for the reason, it could be anything. By the way, I heard the old man said that you and, forget it. Jiraiya hesitated for a while but still didn't ask about Naruto. He would wait until they were separated to take a look from a distance. He was also afraid that he would see him. Naruto would be reluctant to leave in the future, but he would definitely follow the Big Toad Sage's prophecy. So, Jiraiya's departure was inevitable. This time he was only going to stay for a few days. After arranging Xia Li, he would leave and continue his journey. Xia Li did not ask much. He roughly guessed who Jiraiya wanted to ask, but he really didn't know what to say. Should he tell Jiraiya about Naruto's experience? Given Jiraiya's personality, if he knew about Naruto's treatment, he would probably ask to take Naruto with him, but would Konoha allow its Jinchuriki to wander around outside the village? If he did so, it would inevitably cause a conflict between Jiraiya and the village. With the third generation, Jiraiya's teacher, there was no way Jiraiya could take Naruto away. It can be said that even if Xia Li told Jiraiya, except for causing a conflict between Jiraiya and the village, nothing else could be solved. The most important thing is, would Naruto really be willing to leave with Jiraiya who suddenly appeared? Would he believe in the third generation who had always been with him or the Jiraiya who had just met him? So, at this time, Xia Li just fell silent. Then, let's meet here tomorrow morning. Little Xia Li, go home first. It's getting late. Jiraiya said as he summoned a bunch of scrolls and then compressed them into a scroll and handed it to Xia Li, asking him to open it when he got home. Xia Li looked at this scene and decided in his heart that he would also learn these things in the future. Although they might not be very useful in battle, they are indeed very useful in life. Then, Xia Li said goodbye to Jiraiya and left alone. After watching Xia Li leave, Jiraiya slowly walked in a direction, where there was someone he wanted to see but was worried that he would not want to leave after seeing him. Chapter 62, Jiraiya and Minato's Reputation Issues. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Jiraiya quickly arrived at a remote place, and then watched from a distance a figure in training. The golden hair like Minato made Jiraiya's eyes very gentle, and at the same time he couldn't help but recall Minato's life. Looking at Naruto's training, Jiraiya smiled. It seemed that Minato also had a good offspring. After watching for a while, Jiraiya left. He did not fail to find the Umbu hidden in the dark, but he did not say anything. After all, even when Kushina was not strong enough before, there were Umbu following her, not to mention Naruto now. Jiraiya also took a closer look. They were indeed all Umbu directly under his teacher, so he could barely rest assured. However, what Jiraiya didn't know was that in addition to the Umbu here, there were many people guarding other places, not allowing some people who might appear here at ordinary times to enter, so that Jiraiya could ensure that he would not see Naruto being bullied. Moreover, after Jiraiya left, the group of people continued. Although Jiraiya did not hide his aura, who knows if Jiraiya will kill a surprise attack. The most important thing is that the third generation has not ordered to leave yet, so they can only continue. Jiraiya naturally did not kill a surprise attack after leaving. He just came to the original Uchiha clan land and looked around. Looking at the clan land that was basically empty, Jiraiya also sighed. When he heard the news, Jiraiya did not believe it, but as time went by, the extermination of the Uchiha clan has become a foregone conclusion. At this time, he could not believe it. Even now, Jiraiya did not quite understand it, but soon, he left. After all, Uchiha had little relationship with him, and he came just to confirm it with his own eyes. Jiraiya is now mainly thinking about how to teach Xia Li in the future. It is impossible to leave with Xia Li. Xia Li is still in the stage of laying the foundation, and he has no fixed place to go. In order not to delay Xia Li, he can only find a fixed place with Xia Li. Why would he leave Konoha if that's the case? More importantly, in addition to collecting materials, he would also sneak into some places to get information, and it would be inconvenient to bring Xia Li with him. However, even if he didn't bring him with him, he could still teach him. If he couldn't teach him, he still had the boss, but now, Jiraiya was also recalling the time he spent with Xia Li today. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that as a 7-year-old child, Xia Li was really too mature, and his performance was completely different from that of his age. Jiraiya was thoughtful. Xia Li had returned home at this time and opened the scroll. As expected, after he opened it, a lot of other scrolls popped up directly, and Xia Li began to browse through them roughly. Most of them were about sealing techniques, and there were also scrolls recording Flying Thunder God. The most important thing was the experience of the 4th generation, and the rest were about summoning techniques. Xia Li was a bit overwhelmed looking at so many scrolls. The last time he encountered this situation seemed to be in high school in his previous life. Forget it. I have to learn summoning recently, so I should read summoning first. Although it is different from the summoning of objects, there must be similarities, which is easier to learn. Then I will read the sealing technique. As for Flying Thunder God, it is useless to read it now because I have not mastered the other ones, so Xia Li buried his head in the work until Shinai came back from work. Mom, today I worshipped one of the legendary 3 ninjas as my master. Xia Li shared the good news with Shinai. Huh? 3 ninjas? Shinai opened her eyes wide, and then asked, is it Tsunade-sama? Tsunade-sama returned to the village? No. Is it Jiraiya-sama? Suddenly, Shinai's face changed a little. Although he was still shocked, it seemed that there were other emotions in it. Yes. Xia Li nodded. Then, Xia Li felt that the atmosphere was a little silent, and when Xia Li was a little strange, Shinai finally spoke. Well, Xia Li, although it is a good thing to be able to worship Master Jiraiya, you must also remember that you already have Shao Ino. Sina said seriously. Suddenly, Xia Li's face was a little tense. How widespread is the reputation of his teacher's lust? In fact, Jiraiya's reputation is okay in the ninja circle and the men's circle, but unfortunately, Jiraiya's reputation has long been spread among the ladies of Konoha. Ahem. Xia Li couldn't help coughing twice and then changed the subject, telling Sina about his acquisition of Flying Thunder God, and also emphasized that this is the famous ninjutsu of the 4th Hokage. Then, Xia Li saw Sina with a completely different attitude. I saw my mother's eyes shining, and she kept persuading Xia Li to learn Flying Thunder God well and not to let the reputation of the 4th Hokage down. Suddenly, Xia Li understood that when his mother was a student, she was probably a little fan of Minato Namikaze, right? At this time, Xia Li couldn't help but feel a little sympathetic for his cheap father whom he had never met, but fortunately, his family's conditions were definitely not the same as Namikaze Minato's, so he didn't have to worry about the hat problem. However, Namikaze Minato was indeed famous in the village as the 4th Hokage at that time, and should have been the ideal object in the minds of most ladies. Unfortunately, he was snatched away too early by that blood-red pepper and was taken care of too well. Xia Li didn't expect to know more about her mother in this way. She had never seen it before. After the meal, Xia Li continued to go back and read the dossier. He had already finished reading the psychic technique. It was indeed somewhat different from the psychic technique of artifacts, but it was very similar. He felt that it should not be difficult to learn it, but he couldn't measure it with his chakra. Just know how far a toad can channel, and what he wants to see now is the lot of sealing techniques that give Xia Li a headache. There are so many, and he has to learn them from scratch. There is no limit to learning. In the next few days, Xia Li would take time to read the sealing technique files whenever he had free time. However, what Xia Li didn't understand was that Jiraiya didn't seem to have any intention of checking his psychic skills, although he also showed him the psychic skills. Spiritual magic, but obviously the purpose is not this. Even so, the details of Jiraiya's psychic skills were also very clear. Jiraiya made seals one by one in front of Xia Li carefully, and then the flow of chakra in each seal would be reflected from the outside, allowing Xia Li to see it clearly. Clearly, however, compared to ninjutsu, Jiraiya took him to many places to start playing. Of course, it was not the kind of place where he could find flowers and flowers, but some places similar to the Naruto World Amusement Park, which made Xia Li feel a little unbearable. Finally, on this day, Xia Li couldn't bear it anymore. "Teacher, you don't need to take me to these places." Xia Li looked directly at Jiraiya and said seriously. "Well, yes, but I think you might not have the conditions to come here when you were a child, so you might be happy after you come." Jiraiya also scratched his head. He actually thought about it for a long time, and finally felt that Xia Li it must be a lack of experience in this area. If Xia Li is a normal person, then maybe Jiraiya's idea is right. However, Xia Li is not a normal child. He has not been interested in these things since he was a child. "Teacher, I understand what you mean, but compared to this, I actually prefer the feeling of myself getting stronger. The feeling of getting stronger little by little through my own efforts is what makes me most intoxicated and like it. I have seen these conditions from the outside world, but I don't want them," Xia Li said seriously. To be honest, he was a little touched by what Jiraiya did. The other party must have really thought about him. After all, his behavior was indeed different from that of a child in peaceful times. It was as if he had lost his childhood since he was a child. "So Jiraiya, I just want to make up for it." However, Xia Li said that he really didn't need it, and now he had to go to the training ground to practice more after every game. After hearing what Xia Li said, Jiraiya stared at Xia Li in a daze, and finally nodded. "Okay then, let's test the results of your psychic learning today." Chapter 63 Poor and Helpless Jiraiya. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. It was still the familiar back mountain. Xia Li was fully prepared at this time. "Well, come on, use your full strength and try the summoning technique." Jiraiya looked at Xia Li and said solemnly. "There is no risk in using the summoning technique correctly. At most, the summoning will fail due to insufficient chakra. However, if it is used incorrectly, the problem will be serious." Hearing this, Xia Li also nodded, bit his finger, and began to make seals. He knew that it was a foolish dream to summon Gamabunta with his current chakra, and he didn't even want to think about the two people next to Gamabunta. Summoning technique. Jiraiya nodded while watching from the side. The seals were very standardized, and the control of chakra was also very perfect. In this way, the summoning technique would not fail. It was just that he didn't know which one would be summoned. A wisp of white smoke dissipated, and Jiraiya also looked forward to it. However, when he saw the toad inside, a look of surprise appeared on his face. It's not that he didn't know him, but he happened to be too familiar with this person. The orange-based body is full of blue-green patterns, and there is a round bead with Zhong engraved on its neck. It is the Toad Zhong that he often summons. Of course, Toad Zhong's body size is not the largest in Myoboku Mountain, but it is definitely not the small one, and Xia Li was able to summon Toad Zhong for the first time. Not only can it show that his chakra control is high enough, but also with Xia Li's current chakra amount, it can only show that Xia Li's one-time extraction of chakra is also high enough. Originally, Jiraiya thought that Xia Li's first summon of a small toad should be very good, and the normal ones are summoned from tadpoles. Now it seems that he underestimated Xia Li. And Toad Zhong did not show any surprise when he was summoned. Although it was a little strange that the weight on his head seemed to be much lighter, habit made it want to pose for the appearance. Posture agreed with Jiraiya. However, before it could pose, it saw Jiraiya's figure in front of it, and its body suddenly stopped there, and asked questions. "Jiraiya? Why are you here?" Gamacha couldn't help but ask, and glanced up at the same time. "If you are here, then who is above me?" "That's my new apprentice. I'll ask for your guidance in the future." Jiraiya said with a big laugh. Hello, I'm Xia Li. Xia Li also looked at Gamacho at his feet and said. Xia Li. Since you are Jiraiya's apprentice, you can continue to summon me in the future. I'm Gamacho. Gamacho also said. Well, okay. Xia Li also smiled. Although summoning is basically irreversible, the summoned ninja beasts may not necessarily agree to help you fight, just like Gamabunta, who was summoned by Naruto with the Nine-Tails chakra at the beginning. No, it should be said that even if Jiraiya summoned him, he might not be obedient. It seems that the Gamacho he summoned this time is the kind of person who is very obedient and gentle. Well, since everything is fine, I'll go back. After looking around, Gamacho found no enemies and didn't need him to cooperate with Jiraiya's performance, so he didn't think of staying here. Thank you for your hard work, Gamacho. Xia Li looked at Gamacho and felt that he seemed to be quite handsome, but unfortunately his combat ability was not very good. No, it should be said that the real frontal combat ability of the toads in Myoboku Mountain is not too strong. Most of them rely on their size advantages. They are indeed somewhat unsolvable in the early stage, but facing those perverts in the later stage, they can basically only be flattened and rounded. Hearing this, Gamacho looked at Xia Li, then leaned down, let Xia Li down, and then turned into a puff of smoke and dissipated. Well, it seems that it has a good impression of you. Jiraiya saw this scene and couldn't help but smile and said. Gamacho is also quite good, but it's a pity that it is unlikely to be summoned to fight now. Xia Li also said. Jiraiya nodded. After all, there was not much chakra that could be allocated to summoning in battle, which meant that it would take a long time for Xia Li to rely on Gamacho to fight. As for Gamacho's combat power, under the same conditions, it would not be a problem to deal with an ordinary Chunin. Teacher, in this case, my study of summoning can be considered successful, right? Xia Li asked. Jiraiya nodded and said, that's right. Whether you can summon a more powerful toad has nothing to do with your ninjutsu, but depends on whether your chakra is sufficient. Finally, it comes back to the issue of chakra quantity. Xia Li scratched his head helplessly, feeling that many of his things were stuck on this. There is no way, even if you are a genius, chakra needs to grow slowly. Jiraiya laughed and comforted. Xia Li glanced at Jiraiya. The Uzumaki clan and the Senju clan were not like this. Although the Uchiha clan was far inferior to the previous two, it was actually not bad. Oh no, they also grew little by little, but this point was only 1 billion points for ordinary people. Next, let's start learning the sealing technique. Jiraiya thought for a moment and said. Okay, I just have some questions about sealing technique that I want to ask the teacher. Xia Li also nodded and said. Wait a minute. Jiraiya suddenly ran out of ideas and said, you said you have read the files on sealing technique? Well, I read it roughly, but I haven't looked carefully yet. I have a lot of doubts that need to be answered by the teacher. Xia Li said with a smile. Since there is a teacher, and this teacher probably won't stay in the village for long, he must find a way. Just make him bald. Read, have you finished reading? Jiraiya stared at Xia Li with his eyes widened. Those densely packed words made him feel a headache. If it weren't for studying, he wouldn't even bother to read. At this time, Jiraiya, who used to be a scumbag, looked at Xia Li. He originally thought that at this age, he would no longer have to suffer attacks from Orochimaru, but he did not expect that he would be attacked by his new disciple. That's the fear that a scumbag looks at a top student. And next, Jiraiya knew that this day turned out to be his Good Friday, because Xia Li had prepared many questions, and as a teacher, how could he not answer them? Originally, Jiraiya just wanted to raise the question and let Xia Li think about it for himself, and then he went to pick up the light for the first time in a long time. After all, he had been playing with Xia Li recently, and he didn't have much time to go there. Today, after Xia Li put forward his idea, I thought I would have time, but I didn't expect. Seeing that it was already getting late, Xia Li bid farewell to Jiraiya with satisfaction. If he wasn't worried about Sinai, he would have stayed up all night. At this time, Jiraiya had long lost his heroic spirit. He was like a withered tree that had been drained of its nutrients, pitiful and helpless. Chapter 64 Early Graduation. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. That night, Sandai was shocked when he saw Jiraiya, who was a little dying in the office. He had never seen Jiraiya like this before. Jiraiya had always been full of energy since he was a child. Jiraiya, what happened? The third generation's voice also contained a hint of concern. Then, Jiraiya complained to the third generation, telling how Xia Li, the apprentice, squeezed him. The teacher, Sandai, was a little amused and couldn't help but said, "Now you know the benefits of studying seriously. If you hadn't studied seriously before, you wouldn't be able to teach your disciples. I'm definitely more than capable of teaching my disciples. It's just that I encountered such a situation when I was teaching Xia Li." Jiraiya responded. The third generation didn't refute anything at this time. After all, what Jiraiya said was true. He didn't expect Xia Li to learn things so quickly. "How about you let me teach you?" Sandai said suddenly. If he learns so quickly, wouldn't it be appropriate for him to accept his mantle? Although the only innate attributes are wind and thunder, other attributes cannot be acquired through training. It's not impossible, but Xia Li is still my apprentice. Jiraiya looked at the third generation and said, although the training made him physically and mentally exhausted, he would be stupid to hand over a genius apprentice. Sandai smiled and said nothing more. After a long time, Sandai spoke again. "Jiraiya, when do you want to leave?" "It's only been in the past few days. My schedule has been delayed a lot," Jiraiya said after calculating the time. "What about Xia Li?" Sandai asked. Xia Li, he is in the stage of laying the foundation now and is not suitable for running around with me." Jiraiya naturally understood what the third generation meant, but he still said. Sandai took a puff of cigarette, and after being silent for a while, he spit it out, looked at Jiraiya, and said, "Have you never thought about staying in the village?" "Teacher, I have told you the prophecy of the great toad sage before. In order to cope with the crisis that may destroy the world in the future, I must continue this journey. I have already thought about how to arrange it according to Xia Li's words." Jiraiya, he also said it seriously. The third generation didn't speak, but seemed to be a little older. He was smoking there, not knowing what he was thinking. It made Jiraiya a little bit unbearable, but he couldn't agree with what the third generation said, although Jiraiya also knows that if he stays, there is a high probability that the third generation will train him as the next Hokage, but Jiraiya has no interest in the position of Hokage. If possible, he would prefer to live an easy life. Be more chic. "Teacher, I have one more thing to come to you for." After a long silence, Jiraiya spoke again. "Say it." Sandai's voice was still calm, but there was no hint of disappointment. Xia Li's level has actually exceeded the level of the ninja school. If one day Xia Li applies to graduate early, I hope the teacher can agree. Jiraiya said. "Okay." Sanda nodded. Although he wanted Xia Li to continue to cultivate bonds with those classmates, he also knew that Xia Li's level had kept him in the ninja school, which was indeed a waste of a lot of time. Now, Jiraiya has become Xia Li's teacher. It would be best if the school has one, but it's okay if there isn't one. After completing his purpose of coming here this time, Jiraiya stayed with the third generation quietly for a while and then left. Walking on the street, Jiraiya looked back at the direction of the Hokage's office and also let out a feeling. A helpless sigh. Does Jiraiya, who has been collecting intelligence from the outside world all year round, really have no idea about the situation inside Konoha? Early the next morning, Jiraiya looked at Xia Li, who was full of energy and eager to ask questions, and suddenly felt a little pain in his liver. Stop talking about sealing techniques today," Jiraiya said quickly. "Then what are you going to teach?" Xia Li was a little disappointed, but didn't say anything. He looked at Jiraiya and asked what he would learn today. He was not very picky. "Today I will talk about your follow-up development, Xia Li." Jiraiya said seriously, "I will leave in a few days." "Can't we not leave?" Xia Li asked. Although he had known it for a long time, he finally had a teacher and he hadn't finished it yet. Sorry, Xia Li, I have very important things to do as a teacher, and I can't stay in Konoha all the time. Jiraiya said, looking at Xia Li's disappointed look, and then said. But don't worry, Xia Li. I have already arranged your follow-up training plan. After I leave, I will ask a very powerful being to teach you. At the same time, you can use the secret medicine. It's where those toads live. Xia Li also nodded, looking forward to it, hoping to solve his chakra problem. Yes, and Xia Li, do you want to graduate early? Jiraiya asked. You must know that with your current level, there are very few people in the ninja school who can help you. Graduation? Does it mean becoming a genin? Xia Li asked. Well, my teacher has already told the old man. If you want to do it now, you only need to tell him. The old man will agree. After Jiraiya finished speaking, he said no more, letting Xia Li think before answering. However, to Jiraiya's surprise, Xia Li quickly gave his answer. Teacher, I don't want to graduate early now. Xia Li said seriously. Oh. Can you tell me the reason? Jiraiya was a little curious. Well, because I am still in the stage of laying the foundation, I think every day cannot be given up, and after becoming a genin, I have to complete some tasks, which will delay my training time. Xia Li said. Well, although you sacrifice some training time, you also gain mission experience and combat experience from it, which may not be worse than simple training. Jiraiya asked a question, however, Xia Li still shook his head and said, it's not too late to wait until my body enters the next stage to get mission experience, and I don't think genin can get the combat experience that the teacher mentioned. First of all, it's not a war period now, so genin's mission will not rush to the battlefield. Their mission is just some simple miscellaneous work. Even if there is a travel mission, they usually won't encounter hostile ninjas during the mission. I don't think under such conditions, they can get any useful combat experience. As he said, Xia Li stared at Jiraiya. So I don't want to graduate early, but I think I don't need to wait until I'm 12 to reach the next stage, and it won't be too late to graduate then. Well, that's fine, then when you feel you can graduate, go to the third generation and ask for it. Jiraiya looked at Xia Li with some appreciation, although there was something wrong. If Xia Li graduated, he would let the old man arrange some suitable tasks for Xia Li, instead of those regular genin tasks. However, Xia Li said so and gave his reasons, and Jiraiya couldn't find any faults from it, so he didn't force it. Since Xia Li had planned it himself, let it be. Teacher, is there anything else? Xia Li asked. No. Jiraiya had a bad premonition. Then let's continue to learn the sealing technique. Suddenly, Xia Li's eyes lit up and said, on this day, Jiraiya felt that his few remaining brain cells were squeezed dry again. P.S. I caught a cold these 2 days, and my head felt like paste. Alas. Chapter 65, Shenzhua Xingren. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. As time went by, the day when Jiraiya left was approaching. On this day, Jiraiya's eyes were a little vague after looking at his disciple. What kind of abyss and hell had he been in these days? The key was that he couldn't hide. Now, Jiraiya was thinking about whether to leave the village immediately and stay away from his disciple. Xia Li's face showed a satisfied look. His theoretical attainments in sealing techniques have made great progress these days. Although he can continue to study, the sealing techniques he can actually use now are far worse than the theory. This is not good. Xia Li also understands, but who let Jiraiya leave soon, so he can only focus most of his energy on theoretical knowledge. After Jiraiya leaves, he will start to practice slowly. I think the learning speed will not be bad. However, Xia Li looked at Jiraiya with a somewhat unnatural expression, and he was also a little funny. He naturally knew that Jiraiya had been asked to death by him these days, but, again, who told you to leave Konoha? If you didn't leave, I wouldn't hold you back. Are there any more questions today? Jiraiya didn't notice that there was a tremor in his voice. If people who knew him heard it, they would probably be surprised. Is this still the Jiraiya they knew? Don't worry, teacher, there's nothing for now. I've learned too much theory. It's time to practice next. Xia Li said with a smile. After these days of getting along, he was not as restrained as before. That's good. Jiraiya breathed a sigh of relief, and then suddenly realized that something was wrong. He stared at Xia Li with wide eyes and said, "You little brat, what do you mean by don't worry? How can I, a great toad sage, be troubled by such a small matter? Then I'll continue to ask. It happens that I haven't seen more profound ones." Xia Li said and wanted to take out paper and pen, as if he had been prepared. Jiraiya's face froze, but he still said, "Then come." "Forget it, I don't have anything to ask anymore." Xia Li also saw that Jiraiya was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. After thinking about it, he felt that he should give Jiraiya some face, so he said, suddenly, Jiraiya felt that his waist and legs were no longer sore, and he was fine again, laughing. "I said, how could a great toad sage like me be troubled by such a small thing?" Xia Li looked at Jiraiya, and he had to say that Jiraiya's figure was broad and big, and such a laugh looked really heroic. "Teacher, you are leaving tomorrow, right?" Xia Li's tone was also a little reluctant. He only now realized how cool it was to have a teacher who could really teach him. For example, all the questions he asked these days, if he was allowed to overcome them slowly by himself, it is definitely possible to overcome them, but it is uncertain how long it will take. If it is fast, it will take a few months, and if it is slow, it may take nearly a year. "Well, sorry, little Xia Li, I can't take you with me." Jiraiya's eyes softened after hearing this, and he stretched out his hand to rub Xia Li's head and said, "It's okay, I will go to find the teacher when I am strong enough later." Xia Li actually didn't like people rubbing his head like this. He usually avoided it, but tomorrow was the time of separation, so he let it go. Okay, then the teacher will wait for you to find me." Jiraiya laughed. "Well, when I find the teacher will continue to teach me the sealing technique." Xia Li suddenly said. Suddenly, Jiraiya was choked, and his laughter was cut off there. Then, after seeing the smile on Xia Li's face, he couldn't help but smile and shook his head. "You stinky boy, you actually cheated this immortal, but with your speed, when we meet next time, maybe your sealing technique will surpass the teacher's." "Maybe." Xia Li did not deny that he learned this kind of theoretical ninjutsu very quickly. Jiraiya laughed again. He liked Xia Li's confidence. Compared with Minato, they both had their own advantages. To be honest, he didn't expect that the talents of his disciples were so good. After a long time, Jiraiya continued. "I have already told Myoboku Mountain about you. Today, I will let you meet my boss." Jiraiya bit his finger and began to make a seal. Xia Li, who was beside him, only felt the surging chakra on Jiraiya's body and was a little envious. If he had this amount of chakra, he would definitely be able to summon Gamabunta. However, Gamabunta should not let Jiraiya be the boss, and Xia Li could roughly guess who was suitable for teaching in Myoboku Mountain. A white smoke rose, and soon a petite figure emerged from it. "Ahem, little Jiraiya, it seems that the time you said has come." Boss, this is my new apprentice," Jiraiya said, pulling Xia Li in front of him and introducing him to Fukasaku Sage. Fukasaku Sage first looked at Xia Li carefully, then walked in front of Xia Li and began to touch Xia Li's body. Soon, Fukasaku Sage exclaimed, "Little Jiraiya, it seems that you have accepted an incredible apprentice. His foundation is much better than when you entered Myoboku Mountain, and his age is quite suitable." As he said this, Fukasaku Sage couldn't help but show a satisfied look on his face. In his opinion, Jiraiya's new apprentice is not weaker than the previous one. The previous one has already surprised him, and he didn't expect the new one to be the same. "Of course, how can you become my apprentice without talent?" Jiraiya showed a proud look, and then asked, "But, boss, in terms of age, Xia Li is only 7 years old, there should be a few years left. Why do you say it's still suitable?" Jiraiya was a little confused about this. Senjin Fukasaku stroked his white beard and said, "Your apprentice's body is not ordinary. He should have started training since he was very young, and he also used some special methods. I just touched it with the fairy technique. Your apprentice can enter the next stage at least 1 year in advance, or even earlier." Jiraiya calculated the time. More than a year in advance, wouldn't Xia Li be able to enter the next stage when he was a little over 10 years old? In this way, the time is indeed a little tight. At this time, Jiraiya was also a little fortunate. Fortunately, he came back at this time. Xia Li's eyes lit up next to him. Although he knew that he would definitely be able to enter the next stage in advance, he didn't expect to be able to advance so much in advance. It seems that the effect of Thunder Escape Massage is still very good. Even if the effect is not good later, he must continue to persist. At this time, Fukasaku Sage also looked at Xia Li and said, "Your name is Xia Li, right? Since little Jiraiya asked me to teach you, I will be responsible for your training plan from now on." "Okay." Xia Li nodded, a little hesitant, not knowing what to call him. Fukasaku Sage also saw Xia Li's hesitation, nodded and said, "Just call me Fukasaku Sage." Chapter 66 Myoboku Mountain and Eating Insects. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Senran Fukasaku looked at Xia Li, and he was more and more satisfied. "Boss, it's better to do it now than today. Let me take little Xia Li to the places he will often go to in the future." Jiraiya said. "Well, that's fine. I'll go back and prepare. You get ready here." Senran Fukasaku nodded and turned into a puff of white smoke and disappeared. "Teacher, how should I prepare? Also, do I have to go there to practice?" Xia Li asked. There were some things that he couldn't just know without asking. "I'll do the preparations. You adjust your state. You may not be able to adapt to the first reverse summoning." Jiraiya thought for a while and said. "As for the training place, although it's the same everywhere, the problem is that you can't keep the summoning state all the time, so it's better to let you be summoned there." Xia Li nodded at Jiraiya's words. "What? Don't you want to leave Konoha and practice outside?" Jiraiya asked at this time. "That's not the case." It doesn't matter if you have it. Reverse summoning only requires you to go there during the day, and you can still come back at night, just like I did back then." Jiraiya said, and he also fell into memories. At that time, Orochimaru had not yet defected. For a moment, the scene was a little quiet, and no one spoke. "Xia Li, get ready," Jiraiya suddenly said. "Yes." Xia Li was actually ready a long time ago. The next moment, 2 figures disappeared directly in the back mountain of Konoha. "Is this Mount Myoboku?" Opening his eyes, Xia Li looked around, most of which were lush green oceans, and in this ocean, there were all kinds of toads of all sizes, and the various toads also noticed the 2 people. Some greeted Jiraiya, and some pretended not to see them. "Yes, Xia Li, this is Mount Myoboku." Fukasaku looked at Xia Li and saw that he had no adverse reactions after being reverse summoned. Although it was a bit strange, he still answered. Jiraiya next to him was not surprised. Xia Li had a talent for space, so it was not surprising that he had no adverse reactions. "Very beautiful," Xia Li said after hearing what Fukasaku said. "Yeah." Fukasaku stroked his beard with satisfaction after hearing it. Suddenly he thought of something and asked, "Have you eaten? My wife should have prepared delicious food. If you are hungry, you can go and eat some." As he said that, Fukasaku licked his lips, obviously a little hungry. As soon as Fukasaku said that, Jiraiya's face changed color. No, Xia Li and I had eaten a lot before we came." "Oh, that's a pity. Then I will go alone. Little Jiraiya, you can take Xia Li around here. Anyway, you are familiar with this place." Fukasaku said it with some pity. Jiraiya was relieved after Fukasaku left. Xia Li also thought of the food in Myoboku Mountain in the original book, and his face changed. He asked with difficulty, "Teacher, does the food here refer to the food of toads? Jiraiya looked at Xia Li, and finally gave a thumbs up and said, smart. In other words, will I eat those insects like toads in the future? Xia Li's face was pale. How could he forget this? He was a bit picky about food. If he was given insects to eat, he would probably spit them out directly. Then Xia Li thought quickly in his mind, and then looked at the lush forest around him. Suddenly he thought of something, bit his finger and started to make seals. Summoning technique. Jiraiya looked at Xia Li with some curiosity at this time, and wanted to see what Xia Li was going to do. Xia Li felt his chakra, and it was not consumed much. It should be because Toad Zhong was not far from his current position, so the consumption was so small. Maybe Flying Thunder God will have similar performance in the future. Xia Li was thoughtful, like when he was reverse summoned, he should be able to maintain the state of emptiness and darkness after getting familiar with it, and maybe he could feel something. It's Xia Li. After coming out, Gamacho felt the weight on his head that was completely different from Jiraiya's and knew that they were going to fight together so soon. The next moment, when Gamacho wanted to observe the enemy, he found something wrong. Why is this environment so familiar? Hey! Has Xia Li come to Myoboku Mountain? Gamacho asked. Yes, Gamacho, I should practice here most of the time in the future. Xia Li replied. Then, do you need me to do anything? Gamacho was a little confused. Does he need to summon it for practice? Well, I want to ask Gamacho to find me some food. Xia Li finally stated his purpose. Food? Bugs? Gamacho asked, but there should be no shortage of bugs here. Not bugs, bugs are your food. I am a human, and my food is not much like yours. But, my food is only bugs. Gamacho also felt that there was some truth, but it didn't have other food for humans to eat. No, I want to ask Toad Zhong to bring me some fruits in the forest. I just want to fill my stomach. Xia Li said. Fruits. Those fruits on the trees, right? There are a lot of them over there. I can. Toad Zhong said gently. Thank you, Gam Zhong, you really helped me a lot. Xia Li was immediately excited. This time, he was expressing his true feelings. As long as he didn't have to eat insects, it would be fine. Well, I'm glad I can help. Gam Zhong replied and left. Xia Li was also a little touched at this time. It was great that he was the first to summon such a gentle summoned beast. If it was the kind that was hard to talk to, it would be troublesome. Jiraiya was stunned at the scene in front of him, and then he slapped his forehead. It was indeed easy to find some fruits in the dense forest here. There should even be some ordinary beasts that were not summoned beasts in the forest, so, Jiraiya doubted himself. Why didn't he think of these at the time? He ate those insects for so long. No, I can't think about it anymore. Jiraiya felt that if he thought about it again, he could spit it out directly. After doing this, Xia Li immediately made up his mind to learn the seal of the storage first, and then come here every day to prepare the food and unlock it when he was hungry. If he hasn't learned it yet, he should eat some fruits first. He doesn't eat bugs anyway, bugs. Suddenly, Xia Li's face froze, and he turned to look at Jiraiya and asked, Teacher, the secret medicine of Myoboku Mountain should not be bugs, right? That if it is also a bug, Xia Li really doesn't know what to do. For more chakra, he can only force himself to eat it, but now there is still hope. It depends on Jiraiya's answer. Jiraiya sighed, and when Xia Li's face became paler, he said with a regretful tone, although I also hope so. In fact, there is no difference between those secret medicines and ordinary pills, at least in terms of taste. Suddenly, Xia Li breathed a sigh of relief. It's fine if it looks like an ordinary pill. As long as it doesn't look like a bug, who cares what its raw materials are? Xia Li patted his chest and couldn't help but glared at Jiraiya. Really, he almost scared the baby to death. Jiraiya also smiled at this scene. After so many days of contact, this was the first time he saw Xia Li so panicked. This is a bit like a 7-year-old child in peacetime. P.S. Thanks to Emperor Zhou Tian for the 1500 starting coins reward. Chapter 67 Farewell. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Jiraiya was really familiar with the group of toads in Myoboku Mountain. Basically, he knew toads wherever he went, which made Xia Li familiar with most of the toads, including Gamabunta. Although he didn't even give Jiraiya much face, he still looked at Xia Li. Although he was probably not obedient, he was not to the point of not recognizing Xia Li. After a round, Jiraiya looked at the sky and took Xia Li back to the place where he had just been reverse summoned. At this time, Fukasaku Sage was already waiting for Jiraiya and Xia Li there, but next to Fukasaku Sage was a small green toad with purple hair and purple lips. Jiraiya's face changed when he saw this person, but he still had to take Xia Li forward. "Boss, big sister, we are back. Well, have you finished your visit?" Fukasaku Sage asked. "Of course, except for the big toad sage, I took Xia Li to other places to make them familiar," Jiraiya said proudly, his clam veins spread all over Myoboku Mountain. "By the way, Xia Li, this is my big sister, you can just call her Shijian Sage." "Hello, Shijian Sage," Xia Li said politely. "You are the new apprentice of Jiraiya that the old man mentioned. You look, not bad." Shijian Sage looked at Xia Li carefully, and finally found that she was not inferior to the previous one in terms of appearance, and he was immediately satisfied. "Come on, I have prepared a bug feast for you too, it's guaranteed to be delicious." Shijian Sage suddenly took out a big bowl from behind, and in the bowl there were seemingly plump and nutritious bugs. Suddenly, Xia Li and Jiraiya's faces changed wildly. "Big sister, today's time is up. I'll take Xia Li back first. See you next time," Jiraiya said as he pulled Xia Li and untied the reverse summoning technique and turned into a puff of white smoke and disappeared in Myoboku Mountain. If it was only Xia Li, Jiraiya might have watched the show, but unfortunately, he also had a share. "What, old man? Little Jiraiya is really getting too much. Don't teach that bastard's disciple." Shijian Sennin was furious when he saw this scene. Calm down, kid's mother, after all, they are human beings, and it is inevitable that they don't know how to eat delicious food. Fukasaku Sennin was also a little funny when he saw this scene, but he was not angry. He took the big bowl from Shijian Sennin's hand and ate quickly, looking very happy. Konoha, Back Mountain, Jiraiya and Xia Li, who had released the reverse summoning technique, looked at each other, wiped the cold sweat from their foreheads, and then laughed at each other. "Teacher, if you do this, you won't have to go to Myoboku Mountain anymore. What should I do?" Xia Li suddenly realized something and asked. "That's not something I should consider." Jiraiya's eyes were a little erratic. Suddenly, Xia Li's face changed, and Jiraiya felt something was wrong, so he slipped and ran away. The electric arc on Xia Li's legs began to jump, and began to hunt down Jiraiya. The next day, the gate of Konoha, Xia Li and Fukasaku Sage stood together, looking at Jiraiya opposite. "Teacher, can't we really stay?" Xia Li asked. In fact, there were many things he hadn't learned from Jiraiya, such as the legal right to use the Rasengan. Although Jiraiya didn't teach him, Xia Li knew why. After all, the chakra consumption of the Rasengan was not small. If he taught him now, he wouldn't have so much chakra to learn, and it would be a waste of time. But what Jiraiya certainly didn't know was that Xia Li had already understood its principle and could use it. "Sorry, Xia Li." Jiraiya apologized at this time. In fact, he had already said what he should say before, and there was no need to explain anything at this time. Xia Li was silent for a while, then took out a headband of the same color as Jiraiya's coat from his arms and handed it to Jiraiya. "This is..." Jiraiya couldn't help but open his eyes wide after taking the headband. "A gift for the teacher, don't lose it." Xia Li said so. Jiraiya was silent for a long time, untied his original headband, and then tied his long white hair with the headband Xia Li gave him again, with a firm face, and said, "Don't worry, it will never be lost." It doesn't matter if it's lost, it's not worth much," Xia Li said with a smile. Jiraiya didn't answer, looking at Xia Li, slowly saw the figure of Minato from Xia Li, and smiled on his face. Acceptance is always a mutual process. At this moment, Jiraiya finally stopped accepting Xia Li as his disciple just because he was talented enough, and slowly regarded him as the same as the previous disciple. Although the degree may not be that deep, there is already that trend. I'm leaving. Jiraiya turned his back to Xia Li and waved his hand, then walked away from Konoha. Extremely chic. Xia Li also waved his hand and sighed. As a teacher, Jiraiya was undoubtedly qualified. The other party really did not skimp on his resources. He had always had a good impression of Jiraiya, and he got along even better these days. However, from this point of view, Jiraiya was just heroic, not a fool. Although he accepted the three as disciples at that time, in fact, because of their identities, although he treated them sincerely, he was reserved in teaching. At least, none of the three of them got the spiritual contract of Myoboku Mountain. Senran Fukasaku has been watching this scene with a smile, and at the same time he sighed a little. Little Jiraiya really accepted a good apprentice, after a long time. When Jiraiya's figure disappeared from their sight, Senran Fukasaku said, "Little Xia Li, let's go back. You go back home and get ready." "Okay, Senran Fukasaku." Xia Li nodded and followed Senran Fukasaku away. On the gate of Konoha, the third-generation Hokage also stood there watching this scene, with a smile on his face. Although it was a pity that Jiraiya was not left, this was the result he had known for a long time, so it didn't matter. What made him feel happy was that the relationship between Xia Li and Jiraiya developed as he imagined, so that was good. Jiraiya also told him about Xia Li's subsequent arrangements, including Xia Li's study at Myoboku Mountain. He didn't mean to object. Wasn't Jiraiya like this before? However, Xia Li's mother's salary can be increased a little. The other party's training consumption is indeed not something that an ordinary family can support. The third generation is thinking. The third Hokage looked at Jiraiya's back, then saw Jiraiya looking back at Konoha, then looking up, as if he was also looking at him and saying goodbye. After seeing this scene, the stiff lines on the third Hokage's face seemed to soften a little. Myoboku Mountain. Fukasaku looked at Xia Li seriously and said, "Next, I will watch you practice. First of all, I have to explain that my requirements are very strict." "Yes." Xia Li just answered like this. No matter how strict it is, he believes that he can definitely complete it. Chapter 68, Training at Myoboku Mountain. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Senran Fukasaku looked at Xia Li, who was practicing over there. The other party was practicing according to the training plan he made for him. Senran Fukasaku thought that it would be like when Jiraiya came to practice for the first time. Not only could he not persist, but even the movements needed him to correct for a long time before they could meet the standard. As a result, Xia Li only saw this training plan for the first time, but the movements did not need him to correct at all. They were already perfect, and he couldn't even find any faults. Senran Fukasaku stroked his beard and showed a satisfied look on his face. It seemed that Xia Li's physical skills foundation was better than he thought. Although the physical skills may not be strong, these basic movements are very standard, and this is naturally not Jiraiya's credit, but Konoha's physical skills master, Might Guy's credit. Only someone like Might Guy who has practiced physical skills to the bone can break down the basic movements so perfectly. At this time, Fukasaku looked at the black ruler in his hand and felt that he might not be able to use it so many times this time, unlike the previous time when Jiraiya practiced and he tired it. Moreover, Xia Li's physique is better than Fukasaku imagined. It has been so long, and he has not finished the first training yet. Little Jiraiya, this time you have accepted an incredible disciple. Fukasaku couldn't help but sigh again. Finally, after a while, Xia Li finally reached the first limit. Take it, and then continue the next practice. Seeing this, Fukasaku took out a pill and handed it to Xia Li. Xia Li took the pill and didn't eat it in a hurry. Under Fukasaku's puzzled eyes, he sat cross-legged, and then the arc of electricity on his body began to emerge. Huh. So that's the case, no wonder. Fukasaku was a little surprised. At that time, he felt that Xia Li's physique was growing a little fast. It turned out that the root cause was here. However, in this case, Shinzua looked at Xia Li thoughtfully. The training plan he made this time should be adjusted and the dosage should be increased. On Xia Li's side, after the lightning massage was completed, he took the pill given to him by Shinzua. Xia Li didn't know what the raw materials of this pill were, and he didn't want to know, at least he didn't want to know before he completed the training in the past few years. After swallowing the pill, Xia Li first felt a warm feeling spreading in his body, and the fatigue was still there, but Xia Li clenched his fists. Although he still felt tired, he felt that he could continue to practice. Is this the secret medicine of Myoboku Mountain? Xia Li sighed. Of course, this is our secret, Xia Li, continue to practice. If you want to fully exert the effect of this secret medicine, you need to practice to keep up. Shinzua said so, feeling that this time its ruler should be used, right? After all, the extra foundation brought by the secret medicine cannot actually take effect in the first time, so the next first time is the most difficult to endure. However, Shinren Shinsaku still underestimated Xia Li. After all, Xia Li did not choose to break through the limit before. After taking the secret medicine, Xia Li understood, with this secret medicine, the sequelae of his first breakthrough after a good rest every day will no longer exist, and maybe the second and third times will be okay. So, next, Shinren Shinsaku stared at the crazy scene in front of him in amazement and swallowed his saliva. At this time, he couldn't help but doubt. Is he a little out of touch with the times? So the training plan he made is a little too easy? And is his own secret medicine, a little unable to support Xia Li's amount, and needs to be increased? This feeling made Shinren Shinsaku speechless. You know, the pills Jiraiya took at that time were a little smaller than this amount, and he couldn't use it up in the end, so some of it was wasted. In this way, Xia Li can exert the effect of the medicine to an incredible extent during the effective period of this secret medicine. As long as his body begins to step into the next stage, his chakra amount will explode every day. Now it can be predicted that Xia Li's chakra amount will be much higher than Jiraiya's. With this amount of chakra, it's a pity not to learn fairy arts. Shinren Fukasaku stroked his white beard, and he had a heart of admiration for talent. He made a decision in his heart. When Xia Li's chakra grows to a sufficient level, he will let Xia Li start to learn fairy arts. After completing the second limit breakthrough, Xia Li also felt that his body seemed to have reached the bottom. It seems that it is still not enough to support the third breakthrough, but Xia Li is already very satisfied with this, that is. Xia Li looked at the sky and sighed. After taking this secret medicine, the time spent on practice is really too much, but there is nothing he can do about it. If you want to become stronger, you must always endure the boredom and fatigue of practice. However, Xia Li was actually a little surprised at his performance. He actually broke through the second time. Alas, his physical education teacher in his previous life talked about the existence of this limit and explained that it can be broken through. Then he didn't have the willpower to break through in his previous life, which led to him thinking that his willpower was not good in this life. He was able to break through the limit before because of his strong soul. Now it seems that Xia Li feels that his willpower may not be as bad as he thought, and what will be the result of doing this? Xia Li was a little surprised. Maybe he could really catch up with Xiao Li's physical progress, or even surpass him. And the most important thing is that Xia Li is now practicing within the range allowed by his body with the help of the secret medicine, while Xiao Li, at this time, Xia Li also deeply felt the importance of background. Xiao Li's efforts have obviously exceeded the limit. Xiao Li has obviously entered Might Guy's sight in advance with his appearance. As a result, Xiao Li may not even be able to match him in physical skills, just because he worships Jiraiya as his master. Jiraiya's physical skills may not be as good as Might Guy, but Jiraiya's foundation is not something Might Guy can compare to. Just like the secret medicine of Myoboku Mountain, can Might Guy give it? This secret medicine at least guarantees that during the period when this secret medicine can take effect, his physical growth rate will be faster than that of Xiao Li who works harder. Xia Li sighed, but did not think about it anymore. Although it seems unfair, these are all what he has fought for step by step. Xia Li crossed his legs and closed his eyes. Electric arcs jumped on his body again. Then, as usual, he emptied his body and entered the state of emptiness. However, this time, Xia Li forgot that there was Sage Fukasaku next to him. He saw at a glance that something was wrong with Xia Li's state. Sage Fukasaku observed carefully, thought seriously, and then confirmed that this was the prelude to the Sage mode. Sage Fukasaku was shocked again. Chapter 69 Immortal Arts. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Bang! Xia Li covered his forehead and looked at Fukasaku Sage in confusion, only to see that the other party was holding a black ruler in shock. It was Fukasaku Sage who hit him with a ruler just now. Xia Li also sensed Fukasaku Sage's action and wanted to dodge it. The result is imaginable. Xia Li couldn't dodge Fukasaku Sage's ruler at all. He was hit on the forehead honestly and left the state of emptiness. After Fukasaku Sage took a deep breath, he asked solemnly, "Did little Jiraiya teach you this state? He is so irresponsible. How can you teach this with your chakra capacity?" Rarely, the always gentle Fukasaku Sage showed anger on his face. If this misunderstanding is not resolved, then in short, Jiraiya will also be in trouble. Fukasaku Sage, this is not taught by the teacher. I like to rest like this after training since I was a child. It's very comfortable. Is there anything strange about this state? Xia Li did not mean to trick Jiraiya, so he explained. Really? Upon hearing this, the immortal Fukasaku opened his eyes wide and looked at Xia Li, as if he was looking at a monster. When Xia Li nodded to confirm, the immortal Fukasaku took a few deep breaths, and then said with some excitement, "It would be a waste if you don't learn fairy arts with your talent." Fairy arts? Xia Li asked with doubt. Yes, fairy arts, but Xia Li's current chakra is not enough to learn fairy arts, which is a pity. At this time, the immortal Fukasaku looked at Xia Li and felt for the first time why time passed so slowly. If it was faster, Xia Li's body would grow up, and then he could see Xia Li learning fairy arts. Looking at Xia Li's curious eyes, the immortal Fukasaku thought about teaching Xia Li sooner or later, so he cleared his throat and spoke. Xia Li, in fact, in this world, not only do living things have physical energy and spiritual energy in their bodies, but there is also natural energy in nature. Senjutsu is actually a ninjutsu that absorbs the natural energy in nature and combines it with its own physical energy and spiritual energy in a certain proportion to condense into senjutsu chakra before using it. Said the sage Fukasaku. What is the difference between senjutsu and ordinary ninjutsu? Of course it is different. As long as there is senjutsu chakra, the ninjutsu, physical skills and illusion of the ninja itself will be greatly improved. Said the sage Fukasaku. Then can I learn senjutsu? Xia Li's eyes lit up. Not now. Learning senjutsu must require a huge amount of chakra, otherwise it will be swallowed by the surging natural energy. Xia Li, you also saw those stone statues when you were walking with Jiraiya before, right? Those were formed after being swallowed by natural energy. The sage Fukasaku said solemnly. Xia Li showed a disappointed expression on his face and didn't ask anything else, but did the sage Fukasaku say that natural energy is very turbulent? In fact, the natural energy he sensed in the state of emptiness and meditation did not seem to be what Shinsaku said. However, Shinsaku was an expert in this area, so Xia Li could not say anything, let alone try. What if something went wrong? By the way, Xia Li, in the state just now, could you sense some other energy around you? Shinsaku asked again, but it seemed that there was no. Even if you reached this level, it would be difficult to sense natural energy without applying toad oil. Yes. Xia Li thought about it and replied. Actually. Shinsaku opened his eyes in disbelief. Does that mean that Xia Li does not need to apply toad oil when practicing immortal arts in the future? Yes, but it is very vague. Xia Li replied. Shinsaku took a deep breath again, and then said solemnly, Xia Li, you must remember that your current chakra amount is not enough, so you must not try to absorb them, understand? I understand. Xia Li nodded. By the way, Xia Li, have you used the state you just used in front of Jiraiya? Suddenly, Fukasaku asked. You mean the state of emptiness? I have used it before. Xia Li nodded and said. The state of emptiness, did you name it yourself? Fukasaku asked, stroking his beard. Yes. Fukasaku nodded, and then showed a strong dissatisfaction on his face, but Jiraiya is too casual. I have learned fairy arts for so long, but I still can't recognize your state of emptiness. Xia Li didn't know what to say about this. It seemed that he had let Jiraiya down. Okay, you continue, but be sure not to absorb the energy. Fukasaku reminded again. I understand. Xia Li nodded and closed his eyes. Soon, he entered the state of emptiness again. Looking at this scene, Fukasaku nodded with satisfaction. He was really much better than Jiraiya. Even at this speed, he was much faster than Jiraiya. Xia Li's thoughts were flying in the state of emptiness and meditation at this time. He didn't notice it just now, but Xia Li in the state of emptiness and meditation recalled the scene just now. At the moment when Shinzuoxianren's ruler hit him, his eyes opened. The key is that he did not leave the state of emptiness and meditation at the moment he opened his eyes. And what this means can be imagined. It means that Xia Li has been able to move in the state of emptiness and meditation at a preliminary level. Even if he just blinked his eyes, it was blinking in the state of emptiness and meditation. And what is the biggest function of the state of emptiness? Enhanced perception? Change of form? No, it is to absorb natural energy. Xia Li's recent attention has been on controlling the change of chakra's form in the state of emptiness, and he is working hard to combine the lightning massage with the state of emptiness. Xia Li originally thought that he could move further in the state of emptiness after completing this step, but he never thought that the two were not related in sequence, but could be done at the same time. Maintaining the state of emptiness during action means that natural energy can be absorbed during action. You must know that in Xia Li's memory, the duration of the sage mode of Myoboku Mountain is quite short, and it seems to be a little longer than the activity time of the Giant of Light on Earth, and if Xia Li can complete this method, then the sage mode cannot be continued, or even, achieve perpetuity. Or, can it be further? You must know that the Great Toad Sage can use natural energy to practice when there is no chakra, so does the sage mode really need chakra? Xia Li thought about it for a while and then stopped thinking. He would first figure out how to maintain the state of emptiness during the action, and then learn the ordinary sage mode when the chakra is sufficient. As for the Big Toad Sage and the White Dragon Sage, they still have to wait until they are proficient or even perfect in the ordinary sage mode before thinking about it. The road still needs to be taken step by step. P.S. The editor recommends that it is best to update 6 to 8K every day within 1 month of the new listing. Epsilon sadface Omicron asterisk, alas.so I will try to update 6K, but don't expect 6K every day. I don't think I have enough time to support me to do so. Chapter 70 The Inescapable Bug. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. When Xia Li opened his eyes, his face had changed, and he hurriedly said, Senmin Fukasaku, today's practice is over. I left first because of something at home. Okay. Although he was a little puzzled as to why Xia Li suddenly panicked, and how he knew something was wrong at home, Senmin Fukasaku still nodded and agreed. Xia Li breathed a sigh of relief and untied the reverse spiritualism technique. Not long after Xia Li left, Senmin Shijian came over with a large bowl of unusually plump insects. After seeing Senmin Fukasaku, he looked around and couldn't help asking, where is little Xia Li? Although the secret medicine can replenish the energy needed by the body, it is definitely not as delicious as food. Little Xia Li said that he left first because of something at home. Senmin Fukasaku said this, and he probably guessed what was going on. It should be that Xia Li sensed that Senmin Shijian was coming, so he left in a hurry. Senmin Fukasaku was a little funny. Is it so scary? It's obviously delicious. I threw a bug into my mouth and took a bite. It was so juicy and delicious. I really don't know how to enjoy it. I left first. Zhejiangxianren was a little disappointed, and then he inadvertently glanced at the remaining fruits over there, and couldn't help asking, Dad, what's the matter with those? Shen looked at it and thought for a while and said, it seems that Xiaoli asked Xiaozhong to bring it here. Suddenly, Zhejiangxianren's face changed drastically. Too much, he actually didn't want to eat these and didn't want to eat the bugs I picked out with great difficulty. I picked them for most of the day. It's really too much. I think Xia Li left early just to avoid me. Shen smiled bitterly. Although he also felt that this was the case, it was better not to continue to provoke his wife at this time. Xia Li left with strong dissatisfaction. Then, the next day, Xia Li looked at the bowl of bugs in front of him with a bitter face, and then looked at the angry face of Xia Li. Xia Li, this is what I prepared for you. I spent several hours making this meal today. Although Xia Li didn't say it, her behavior showed that if Xia Li refused again, she would definitely be angry, but Xia Li looked at the bug in front of him. It was good that he didn't vomit it directly, let alone eat it, and Xia Li looked at Xia Li who had been motionless and his face became worse and worse. Xia Li, it's actually very delicious. Xia Li beside him seemed to be demonstrating to Xia Li. He ate a bug in one bite, and then showed a satisfied look on his face. Xia Li sighed, looked at Xia Li and said, Xia Li, I think your cooking skills should be very good. You can tell by seeing that Fukasaku Xianren likes to eat so much. Hearing what Xia Li said, Xianren's expression finally eased a little, and said, then you should eat it quickly, it's delicious. Well, Xianren, our species are different, so insects are actually not within the scope of human diet, and our taste buds are also different, so it's not that I don't want to eat, but I can't eat it. Xia Li said seriously. Hearing this, Xianren's face darkened and said, little Jiraiya can eat it, why can't you eat it? Xia Li was speechless. In the end, you just don't want to eat it. What's so delicious about those things you call fruits? Xianren wanted to get angry, but looking at Xia Li, who was only 7 years old, it was the period of cute babies, so it was not easy to get angry directly, and asked. Okay, mother, if Xia Li doesn't want to eat, don't embarrass him. After all, Xia Li is right. We are different species, and our food may not really be suitable for them. Shensaku also comforted him at this time. When Shen heard this, his face was still not good. After a cold snort, he did not force Xia Li to eat the insects. He turned around and left directly, but it seemed that he would probably not give Xia Li a good face in the future. Thank you. Xia Li thanked Shensaku. Well, you're welcome, but don't you really want to try it? It's really delicious. Shensaku said. There is really no way. This is a physiological reason. Shensaku should also have something that he absolutely cannot eat, right? Even if he eats this thing, it will not have any effect on his body. Xia Li said. Oh, it's understandable if you put it that way. Obviously, Shensaku has things he hates. So insects are like this to me. Xia Li said helplessly. If he was asked to eat insects, he would rather eat coriander. Anyway, he just doesn't like it, not that he can't eat it. Then I'll talk to the old woman later, and let's continue today's practice. Said the immortal Fukasaku. That's right, the reason why he was blocked by the immortal Zijin today was because Xia Li's practice had not yet ended, and then the immortal Zijin came to block the door, so that Xia Li could not leave. On the third day, the immortal Zijin came again. Xia Li had a helpless expression, and his expression also revealed a resolute look. If it really doesn't work, he will give in. After all, this is the other party's territory. Compared with these, the secret medicine is more important. However, when Xia Li came to the immortal Zijin with a look of fearlessness and was about to agree, he found that this time the bowl seemed to be not a bug, but cut fruit. Although it didn't look good, it was not a bug. Humph, can you eat it this time? Immortal Shurjian looked at Xia Li. If Xia Li dared to say anything more to refuse, even if Xia Li was a child and looked cute to her, she would definitely will get angry. Xia Li couldn't help but look at Immortal Shurjian. In fact, the other person, no, he was pretty good. He was just trying to prove his skills. This time Xia Li didn't say anything more. He picked up the bowl, picked up the chopsticks and started eating. I have to say that the fruits here in Myoboku Mountain not only look good, but also taste much better than those outside. Seeing that Xia Li finally took advantage of her craftsmanship, even though it was something she was not good at, Master Shijian's expression finally softened. Well, it's very delicious. Sure enough, Immortal Shijian's craftsmanship is really good. Even if it's just his first time cooking human food, it's still so delicious. Xia Li praised. If this was put out there, there would definitely be a lot of people rushing to buy it. Xia Li wasn't lying. You couldn't buy such fruit outside. Hearing this, Immortal Shijian's eyes lit up, and then he smiled happily and said, "That's right, my craftsmanship is famous far and wide, but those people outside who want to buy my craftsmanship can't." At this time, Fukasaku Sennin also curiously picked a piece of fruit from the Xia Li bowl and ate it. Then he couldn't help but shook his head and said, "I think insects are more delicious." "Go ahead, you are nothing compared to Xia Li. You have different taste buds," Shima Sennin said angrily. He used Xia Li's previous words to teach Fukasaku Sennin, and then looked at Xia Li with a smile and said, "Then I will continue to bring you my craft tomorrow. It will definitely be better than today." Fukasaku Sennin just laughed when he was told this. He was happy to see this scene and didn't want to see a rift between his wife and Xia Li. After all, in its view, after learning the magic of immortality, Xia Li will also need them to perform the magic of immortality in 2 lives, so it is still very important to have a good relationship. He was worried at first, but now it seems that there is no need. Xia Li ate the fruit, thought about it, and said, "If it's troublesome, I won't." However, before he said much, Xia Li saw the change in Immortal Shijian's expression and immediately changed his mind. "Please prepare it for me. I think it's delicious. It would be even better if I can eat it in the future." Immediately, Shijian Sennin left with a smile on his face, and Xia Li finally breathed a sigh of relief. Now, he shouldn't have to eat bugs anymore. Really, this feeling is more tiring than practicing.